Okay, so our second little example is we have just some general business purchase data. So we have um, sales data, we have a supplier, we have some order information, we have some information on the item type, how much it costs, the quantity, the total cost of the order. What else do we have? Something to do with the terms of purchase, and then we have the order date and we have the arrival date. And this is just a little toy example. We start off on row 4 and we go all the way to row 97. And what we're doing here, I mean, this is really just trying to get a handle on some of the summary features in Excel. And I've got the one I completed. I did it here. So what we're going to do is we're just trying to do some of these, get some summaries of the information. Imagine if I was a manager, I wanted to see how we were doing in or ordering in certain product categories. So I get some general information of our orders, and then I kind of look at some very specific drill downs for some specific order types. So the first thing here is we actually have quite a bit of data that we really don't need. Let's just see, we went from rows 4 to 13 and then went straight down to row 97. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight everything we're going to hide. Now, we're not getting rid of this information, but we're just kind of going to look to hide it a little bit. Now, if you notice, I've selected everything here. I just kind of, go all the way down. And then I kind of go back and I have a look at my cell format. And I go, this is under the Home tab. So Home, Cells, Format, Hide and Unhide, Hide Rows. So here we still have everything from row 4 to 97, but between 14 and 96 has been hidden. This just allows us to see a little bit of the format of the data and also do our summary statistics. Now, let's just kind of copy this over. This is what we want. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to get the minimum quantity. Now, the quantity column is here, so we basically want the lowest value here. And Excel has a function for this, and this function is called min. So again, if you're not, funnily enough, if you don't know the function name, quite often you could actually guess the function. So I just type in min, and there's, here's a min function. I press my left bracket, and you can see it just takes a load of numbers and finds the minimum of all these numbers. But in fact, we want the minimum of this range. And this range goes from this one here, F4, and all the way down to F97. So all I did was click F4, click my shift button, and then click F97. And that just says we're selecting everything between F4 and F97. So I could type it in. I'm just using F4, the colon, F97. And then miraculously, we have a min function, so we also have the similar max function. Okay. So for some reason, I thought I wasn't recording, but I obviously am. So the next one we want to do is we want to do the sum of the order costs. And here we have the cost per order. So we want to see how much revenue we've got in total, how much we have in total. So that's a very common kind of business task. Let's just move it a little bit to the right. So all we're going to do is we're going to do exactly the same as before, but this time we're going to use the sum function, and we're going to do it on the order column. So we're going to click that, shift, and click down to the bottom order. We get the sum of all the orders. Now, this is the kind of the month terms, and we want to know what the average is. So we want to know what the average term is. And amazingly, we have a function called average, and this finds the average or the mean. So let's just kind of do as we did before. Shift H4 to 8, H97. And we find the average. Now this, if I was giving that to my boss would go, why do you have all these numbers? So let's just actually format this. Right click, format cells, and we really only need it to 2 decimal places. Anything else is a distraction. So number, and you've got, in Excel, you have all these different formats, but we're going to stay simple. Number with 2 decimal places, and we get 30.64. Okay, so next up we have the number of purchase orders. And what we want here is we're not counting the total quantity, we just want the number of orders. Now we can kind of realize this one because we say, okay, we're going from rows 4 to 97. So it's going to be 97 minus 4 plus 1. So it should be 94. But let's just see if I'm right. Okay, now this time we're just basically counting the rows. So rather than sum, we're just using the count function. And we basically can use any numeric column here. The count won't work if I, for example, if I used A, then we wouldn't get anything useful. You see, it just goes blank. But if we use C, then we will actually get, oh, what happened there? Okay, let's just change that to C. Then we will get 94, as I predicted. Now, imagine we want to see how many of those orders fall into a specific category. Maybe we had some sort of standard. We want a certain number of O-ring orders per time period. Now, so we want all the orders, but we only want them if they have the O-ring in the item description. So what we do is there's actually a conditional count called count if. And again, we want to go through basically everything, and we only want to count the O-rings. So this time, we're actually going to go on the D, and we're going to go count if D4 to D97, and we're going to go O-ring. Now be careful here because obviously it's very easy to misspell things. And then we have 12 O-ring orders. Now we can do it. Count if is actually quite flexible in that we can actually put kind of numeric inequalities here. Notice actually there was a little error here. This if we're going with what the bug did, this was the number of AP terms less than 30, not less than 20. So I just quickly fixed that. So we're basically looking, I guess these are kind of financing terms, or contract terms. So here we do count if, and we want all the ones less than 30. Now, in the rows we can see there's nothing less than 30, but in the hidden ones, there are some rows less than 30. And so there are 17. And you can kind of, if you wanted to see that, you could look at the original data and hide the rows, but there are the 17 rows where we have less than 30. Now, what we want now is we want the number of O-ring orders from a certain supplier, which is Space Time Technologies. So we're actually we're looking at 2 different variables, and we're drilling down a little bit further. And we can still use conditional count, but instead of if, there's an ifs. And this means we can use multiple kind of filtering for my count. So the first one is we want D4 to D97. So this is as before. We could have actually copied and pasted. We've got the O-ring. But now we want another one. And this is on the company name. So A4 to A97. Try and make sure I spell this right. We want Space Time Technologies. Okay, so we basically we count all the things that are both, this is kind of an and, both O-rings and from space-time technologies. Okay, so equivalent to the COUNTIF, there's actually a SUMIF. So we can actually, but this time we're summing one variable and we're conditioning on a second variable. So what we want here is, let's just kind of look that we want airframe fasteners. So we only want the items that are airframe fasteners, and we want to sum the total cost of the order for airframe fasteners. So we're going to use SUMIF, and what we're going to do is we're going to like pick airframe fasteners. So the if, this is like the if statement for all our airframe, all our items. We only want the ones that are airframe fasteners. But what we want to sum is we want to sum the cost per order. So that actually gives us the cost per order of the airframe fasteners in dollars. And I'll actually do a bit of extra formatting once we've done the next one. And this is exactly the same, but this time we want alum sheeting and kind of airframe fasteners. Now, to make things a little bit kind of more complicated, if you look here, you see that we actually have, and we will actually tell you, if you click here, we'll say we've got the range, the criteria, so that's the criteria on the range, and then the variable we're summing. Now, this time with 2, we're going to use SUMIFs. Now, the variable we're summing is actually coming first. This actually confused me. I think, am I doing something crazy? But the summing variable here actually comes first, and then we add the multiple criteria ranges. I think Microsoft, Bill Gates just wants to confuse you a little bit. So here, we still want the cost per order. So we're going to do G. But this time, this actually comes first. But now we put in the criteria. So for the purchase, for the supplier, we want alum sheeting. And then for the item description, we still want the airframe fasteners. So finally, let's just make sure this one's formatted correctly. So we right-click, format cells. If we're using like dollars, we're going to use the accounting, which formats automatically for us. And some of these seem to have been formatted anyway. We're pretty much done now, but I always like my spreadsheets to look at least reasonably consistent. You can see we've got here most of the spreadsheets in Arial 12, and the little bit we've added is kind of the default, which is Calibri 11. So let's just change. Go to Arial 12, just so everything looks the same. And you can see here that we need to get a little bit wider here now, because it's a bigger font. And let's just make sure we can see all of those. Okay, so there we have it. And, a good idea is beyond this, just play around with some of these functions. Just try and do a few of these yourself. Think of different product combinations, different ways of using SUMIF and COUNTIF.